prior to the sexual revolution, our society had a kind of legal and I would say moral consensus on our sexual behavior. And like anything, it wasn't completely uniform, but there was an established paradigm and understanding that was prevalent. Then certain factions within society started to push for a cultural shift that led to the sexual revolution that was based on this notion that we need to liberate our sexuality in Western civilization. The argument used to go, and it still does if you push back against today's established paradigm, is that it's nobody's business what consenting adults do in the privacy of their own homes. Neither society or the state have any right to impose restrictions on anybody's sexual behavior. And this was a powerfully persuasive argument, and it continues to be so today. But unless you're a libertarian or an anarchist, it leaves you open to a very serious contradiction, because it seems to me that most people, especially people on the left, do not actually believe that consenting adults can enter into unregulated agreements. Because the idea of consent absolving parties of any wrongdoing depends on the premise that it's impossible to be a victim of something as long as you consented to it. So, for example, if two people consent to a sexual encounter, then neither of them can claim to be a victim of whatever the consequences may be based on that consent. But we don't think this way when it comes to other aspects of our lives. For example, when it comes to economic transactions, we don't hold this same principle. In fact, a lot of the time we decry it. Take the economic downturn and the housing crash that happened in 2008. It seems to me that most people, and especially people on the left, came away from that blaming the bankers and the lenders for what happened. Very few people had the audacity to lay any of the blame at the feet of the people who actually signed off on mortgages that they couldn't afford. So in that scenario, we have an example of consenting adults agreeing to something together, but very few people would agree that those kinds of transactions should be completely unregulated by the law. And this is especially true, again, for people who tend to lean more politically on the left. So take another example, which is that the left has been consistent in promoting the cause of minimum wage. In other words, it's not enough for two people to look at the price proposed for labor and agree to it just between the two of them. Minimum wage advocates are always saying that there must be some kind of imposition or oversight in the law that will prevent anyone from being a victim in that transaction. So even though two people might look at a job contract and agree, or in other words, consent to work $8 an hour and to pay $8 an hour, society and the state, according to left-leaning thinkers, must intercede and say that you can't agree to that. So if you believe that, then you have to concede that consent between two people is not enough to prevent the state or society from taking an interest. And if you're someone who believes that consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want when it comes to sex, but not when it comes to economic transactions, then you are harboring a massive contradiction. So we have this bizarre and difficult to explain double standard and contradiction when it comes to our sexual ethic, which is why I think it should come as no surprise that for the past half century or more, we've been suffering through a never-ending outbreak of STDs and STIs, an outbreak of unintended pregnancies, a fairly serious decline in mental health, and a staggering lack of success in marriage. So I think the obvious solution is to treat sex like we treat everything else that we exercise prudential judgment with, whether it be economic transactions or something as obvious as nutrition. And nutrition's actually a really good example to draw some inspiration from, because it is a biological function with a very clear purpose, but it also has the potential to produce pleasure as well as influence social dynamics just like sex does. But notice how cautious and prudential we are when it comes to our nutrition. Like, nobody would ever endorse a nutritional approach that says, do whatever you want as long as you're having fun and everybody's consenting. We know we have to exercise responsible restraint in order to remain healthy and in order to actually enjoy our nutritional intake without adverse consequences. And what informs our good decisions when it comes to our nutrition is that we have never lost sight of the fact that the purpose of eating is to fuel our bodies. Pleasure is merely an effect. But if we mistook the purpose of eating to be pleasure, then things would go downhill really fast. And that's what we've seen with sex. Like, imagine for a second if you could be transported to an alien world where it was really common to find people logging onto the internet and watching videos of people eating food that was really pleasurable, and that got them all hot and bothered in the process. Or if you could go to adult-only clubs where there'd be a stage and someone would come out from behind a curtain and dance seductively with a tray of burgers. Or again, if it was really common for people to sneak around behind their spouses' backs to go and have dinner with someone who wasn't your spouse just for the thrill and excitement of doing it with somebody different. You'd probably look at it and you'd say that your appetite for food has become really distorted and perverse. But in reality, that's exactly what has happened for our appetite for sex. And while we think of it as normal, this state of affairs is actually a very short-lived anomaly over the scope of human history, and the effects have already been measurably catastrophic. So if the purpose of nutrition is what informs our good decisions when it comes to eating, maybe we can learn from that and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of sex? Because pleasure isn't it. It has a very explicit biological purpose, but we've divorced ourselves from that in the hopes of being able to isolate the pleasurable effects of sex without having to deal with the biological purpose and the effects that come with that, in the same way that a person who suffers from bulimia might want to eat their favorite foods and experience all the pleasurable effects of that, but then vomit it up later so they don't have to deal with the unintended and perhaps undesirable consequences. But the thing that nobody wants to hear is that the only fail-safe solution to our problems is monogamy, is to have one sexual partner in life. The sexual ethic that we've embraced promised to liberate us from those constraints, but seriously, how constraining is that? I've only ever had one sexual partner in my life, but I'm willing to bet that I've enjoyed far more consistently fulfilling sexual experiences than any bachelor my age. And I've been able to do so without all the baggage and anxiety that comes along with wondering if I'm going to get infected or accidentally get somebody pregnant, or worrying about what the effects are going to be if I let somebody into my life in such an intimate way if I don't intend to go on having a relationship with them. And I've always been able to experience sexuality with the full knowledge that the person I'm experiencing it with is looking out for my best interests and loves me. And that's not constraining at all, and it doesn't come with any of the baggage or anxieties or risks that our current state of affairs promotes. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that, then please consider subscribing and liking, and come find me on Facebook and Twitter. It's a huge help when you do that. It helps us get these videos in front of more and more people. And a big thank you goes out to You Catholic for presenting these videos. And if you want to support the making of these videos, then please consider supporting my work as a digital media and marketing expert. My company, Holdsworth Design, specializes in branding, web and graphic design, marketing, social media, videography, and all that kind of good stuff. So if you know of a parish, a diocese, a ministry, or a business that needs help in those areas, then please send them our way, and I'm sure we can help them out.